Welcome to the Forest Creek Podcast. Today we're here to talk to you about self-help because you need it. I mean, we all need it. That's kind of the point behind it. Today I have with me Jarrod.
Hello.
I'm Raph, obviously. Obviously. If this is your first time joining us, The Forest Creek is an alt-culture pop philosophy podcast, which is a more recent description that I've decided to come up with. Or at least it's alt takes on pop culture sometimes, you know? But pop philosophy is something that we enjoy. And one of the most common topics in pop philosophy surrounds self-help. When they taught philosophy to me in academics at university, the first course you take is logic. The second one you take is metaphysics. And then you take morality. Because you're starting with logic, which is how to think, how to know things, how to know that you're knowing things. Metaphysics is what is the basis of existence? What is the basis of reality? You know, it's kind of natural, comes from there. And then what do you do now that you know that the universe exists around you? You try to apply your ethics. How do you do your everyday interactions? And then you get to the point where the ethics, you're applying them to yourself and how you're leading your own life and how to better your own life. And that's naturally where we find ourselves in self-help. It also extends to psychology quite a bit, right? Because it's your self-psychology. It's your psychology engaging with the psychology of others. The way your brain works, the way their brains work. How can you optimize it? And then you can go from there to business skills. How are you building your own wealth? How are you managing your own organization? It goes from there to health. How are you taking care of yourself and exercising? Sometimes it ventures, kind of circles back to metaphysics, religion and spirituality. In our first episode 7, which I jokingly named first episode, because it is kind of like the first episode, we talked about Stoicism a little bit. That was back when I think you had started reading some Stoicism. I am interested in it in the sense that, in the same way that I'm interested in a lot of Greek philosophy in general, especially Socratics, pre-Socratics. It's funny, sometimes they're actually defined by where they are in relation to Socrates. So there's philosophers, the pre-Socratics, are trying to figure out what the world is made of, like Pyrrhonimus, who's like, the whole world is different forms of fire. And then Thales, who is like, the whole world is different forms of water. So they're all kind of figuring it out still. And then you get to Socrates, who kind of reestablishes logic in the world. The idea of questioning things continuously. And from him, he teaches Plato. So Socrates teaches Plato.
He actually taught him.
He taught Plato. Plato was the first one to start writing things down. Because Socrates believed that if you just wrote everything down, you'd never need to remember anything. Which is funny. That's like a way a boomer would look at a computer. Some way. It's like, what? Just talk face to face. Put your phones away at the internet. That was kind of the Socrates look at things. Plato was the mentor to Aristotle. He's also the writer of Plato's Republic and the Dialogues, which basically were his conversations with Socrates and with other philosophers of the time. Fun fact about Socrates, his whole deal was questioning things. Again, we're in the pop philosophy area, but while we're here, Socrates' whole deal was questioning things. When you asked him a question, he'd ask you a question, and then based off of your answer, he would ask you another question. And that is how he kind of established this idea of building up the world. Premise, answer, and then from the answer derive another premise, and then from that premise another answer until you kind of get a bigger picture. And sometimes you can discover logical incoherence that way. For instance, there was a famous scenario where he's talking to one of his friends who's a priest of, I don't know, Hera or Zeus. These were ancient Greeks. And he started asking him all these questions about the gods and like venturing into the area of heresy for ancient Greeks. And like the priest was like, hang on, dude, do you want to keep asking these questions? You're kind of putting yourself in a dangerous position here. Even to the point where the amount of questioning that he was teaching younger philosophers and younger people in Greece caused him to become somewhat unpopular with the local powers, and so they sentenced him to death.
Oh, okay.
Which is when they told him, you need to drink hemlock, which he did. And that's how he died.
Yeah.
But, Plato went on from that to teach Aristotle, and Aristotle is the founder of like a lot of modern ways of thinking. He's credited even, AD would love to probably jump in on this and say he was credited with a lot of philosophies that are actually quite central to Catholicism, which is very central to the Western world in general.
Yeah.
Not to mention a lot of mathematical things, although we also credit Pythagoras for that stuff. Anyway, I'm lost in Greek philosophy here. Help me, Jared. Help me.
Well, I don't know. I got into Stoicism through the Daily Stoic, and that's really my only source.
Which is a great account.
Yeah, he is. Although I've noticed he says the same thing over and over again. Because, the Stoics are pretty old. They're not coming up with anything new.
Well,
but it's all important stuff. And, I've also been reading Miyamoto Musashi. I've been reading The Vagabond. Yeah, the manga.
Before we jump into the Eastern stuff, because I do think it's very interesting.
Yeah, right.
The thing that we always talk about when we see self-help is we tend to see the same pieces of advice all the time.
Yes.
The reason why is because wisdom hasn't really changed that much. Human beings haven't really changed that much.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've become smarter in some areas and we consider things a little bit differently and we have different technology and clothes and blah, 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 blah. But you still feel happy. You still feel sad. Things give you a sense of meaning and purpose. And then other things don't. And you can see where you're wasting your time. You can see that eating too much makes you feel sick. Yeah. You're still a human, right? So even with Stoic philosophies, with ancient Greek philosophies, with self-help philosophies, morality, metaphysics, all this stuff, it's the same thing. We're saying the same thing yet again because... And all that new modern philosophers can really do is just repackage it. A lot of the time. They deal with the same old ideas because people haven't stopped being human. So we still engage with human philosophies.
That's why stuff like you can read things from Socrates and things that he said about how he felt, and you're like, man, I feel the same way. I read things from the Bible and I'm like, dude, I feel the same way.
Yeah, which is the whole reason why the Bible is such a popular thing, right? But even when it comes to like the Stoics, when you read Marcus Aurelius and he's like, use your time wisely. Really? I should do that?
Or even, I think it was Marcus Aurelius, his quote about staying in bed. Like, is this my purpose in life, is to stay under the covers? No, I have things to do. Yeah,
and you could so easily apply it in a modern sense.
As soon as you told me that, I was like, dude, I go through that struggle every single morning.
Yeah.
I'm like, I've been under these covers for an hour and a half. They're very warm.
Humans haven't really changed that much.
Yeah.
And self-help advice hasn't really changed that much. So on today's podcast, we came up with a list of some of the most popular pieces of self-help advice.
Well, we Googled one.
Shut up. We wrote the list. Well, to be fair, we did our research and then we found a list and we've made our alterations, and now we are going to share with you the most popular pieces of self-help advice, whether they're coming from Eat, Pray, Love or they're coming from 12 Rules for Life by Jordan Peterson.
Boom.
He also did 12 more rules for life. So I guess it's 24 rules for life now.
Yeah. There's a lot of rules.
Yeah.
The only one I've implemented, I haven't read them. I've just heard him list them. I don't know what his meaning behind it is, but I've implemented the one, if you see a cat on the street, pet it. I just liked the sound of that, so I started doing it, and it's improved.
How often are you running into cats on the street?
There's a lot of cats around my workplace.
Oh.
I once had a day, it was wild.
I remember one of them, actually, yeah.
You do?
Well, yeah, when I was coming to drop some things off, a cat came by me, and I was like, oh, okay.
There's one cat there that absolutely loves people.
There's the cat who supervises the studio.
Yeah, Mishmash.
Yeah.
I found one cat, and I called his owner. Apparently, the cat's name is Flip Flops. It was great. But
anyway, petting the cats isn't actually on our list.
It should be.
It is a nice thing to practice.
Yeah.
But in general, making rules for the first part, it's just one of our ways that we like to set order for ourselves, whether it's the 10 Commandments, whether it is 12 Rules for Life, whether it's Musashi's Way of Walking Alone. On a quick side, because we did mention Musashi before and Eastern philosophy in general, it's fascinating to me, the Eastern philosophy takes on things, because it's very wedded to nature. And, observing
Yes.
how nature works, especially when it comes to something like Taoism. I will give a quick overview here of Eastern philosophy, just the same way that I did for the ancient Greeks. You start with Hinduism is the order of the world, right? It is showing you the caste system. It's showing you the cycle of death and rebirth. It is showing you the multiplicity of divine powers and gods that, they are among you all the time. Buddhism is the sublimation of that. It is, you can escape the cycle of suffering. Now we go from there, we can find, especially in China, you get Confucianism, which is a more social order of things. Confucius, his whole deal was, it's a very wise way of looking at the world, but it's all based in terms of organizing society, organizing your own life, and organizing the life of your family. It instills a lot of very solid foundational values that are somewhat conservative in a lot of ways, but also very social, right? Because it's based on the ways like, how can I most efficiently run society? And that's where Confucius comes from. It still influences a lot of modern Chinese practice today. From Confucius, his master, at least I've heard, I might be wrong about this, was Lao Tzu. And Lao Tzu was the guy who came up with Taoism. And Taoism is a little more ethereal, a little bit more spiritual.
I've actually heard there's debate over whether Lao Tzu even existed.
There is.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we don't even know how to spell his name.
Really?
Lao, L-A-O, and then sometimes people go L-A-O-Z-I, some people go L-A-O-T-S-E, some people go L-A-O-T-Z-E.
I thought it was T-Z-U.
And those are just with the English letters.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
T-Z-U is another way.
Yeah.
So I just say Lao Tzu. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't speak Chinese, so I don't know if that was apparent.
Lao Tzu.
But he wrote the Tao Te Ching,
Yes.
which is the spiritual book of the Tao, and it's very well defined by its first line, which is that which can be named is not the eternal Tao, which the way
so
Tao
good.
means way, right? The way, the harmony of all living things, the harmony of your own life. It's very much defined. Like, I like to say that you could learn a lot about Taoism by just observing the physics of water, how it flows down the paths of least resistance, how it can be very forceful in some areas and yet very calm in others, right? And it's Taoism works very well into when we then find some principles of Buddhism and Zen, even, with ideas like a bowl is most useful when it is empty. So emptiness is in itself something incredibly useful, right? This is a concept that finds a home in Buddhism as well, and particularly in Zen Buddhism, which is a Japanese interpretation of Buddhism as taught by Bodhidharma. Bodhidharma was an Indian Buddhist who ventured through China and is credited with teaching the first precepts of Kung Fu and Shaolin, and that's like where the Shaolin tradition descends from. And
It's so interesting to me that martial arts, this style of martial arts, came from Buddhism.
Yeah, it's observing nature and acting like it, right? That's the original kind of way of looking at things. And then that same concept, when it makes contact with Japan, it finds a home in Zen Buddhism. And then Zen Buddhism feeds very nicely into samurai culture, and it gets interpreted that way, especially in feudal Japan. But anyway, now we've kind of given you a kind of overview of the world's philosophy, and these philosophies, they feed into a lot of our modern interpretations. When you see massively popular influencers telling you very honestly obvious things.
Yeah.
Work hard and you'll succeed. That's one of, like, struggle. If you want your dream to come true, you have to work for it.
Yeah.
These are things that our influencers tell us as if they're the bright new idea. It's like, no, people have been saying this for hundreds of years.
Yeah, like Ryan Holiday, the Daily Stoic guy, his book is called The Obstacle is the Way. And all he's doing, essentially, from what I've heard, is summarizing all the Stoic stuff.
Particularly, I think obstacle is the way is a Marcus Aurelius thing, too.
Probably.
Yeah, Marcus Aurelius, who was a Roman, I think he was an emperor at one point,
Yeah.
too. Yeah. All right. So let's dig into our list of the most popular pieces of self-help advice. But at the very top of this list, I want to add my own addition. Number 0 on our list. Know what you want. Know what you want. This can mean a number of things. Set goals, or at least visualize your dream.
Yeah.
Think about it. I was thinking the other day, actually I was just joking with you about, imagine us in the future, we're doing so well with this podcast, we're in a limousine, we're in sport coats, we're shaking a bottle of champagne. Just think about those items. The sport coats, the Rolexes, the limousine, the bottle of champagne.
Yeah.
Imagine money was no object, that you had all the money to do this.
Yeah.
You still have to call a bunch of places and rent a limo.
Yeah.
Where are you going with the limo? What kind of champagne do you want to get?
Yeah.
What sort of champagne do you think you'll like? How about a Rolex? Do you like one that looks like this or one that looks like this? When you're just shopping for items, you are visualizing ideas or visualizing what you want and seeing how this item is going to apply to you, right?
Yeah.
In fact, when you fail to visualize something like that, especially in a store, you end up impulse buying.
Yeah. That's huge. It's like going into the grocery store hungry without a list.
Yeah.
You spend way too much and you get a bunch of crap that doesn't mix.
My Instagram saved is mostly fun-looking products that I'll probably never buy, but I just find them fun. I saw the other day it was like you can replace the trucks on your skateboard with essentially a long ski. And so you can kind of skateboard on mountains and stuff, and you tether it to yourself, right? Or another gun-related one was like a salt gun for getting bugs, and it looked like a modern shotgun, but it shoots salt so that you can kill bugs, which is hilarious. But yeah, I mean, impulse buying can be met with the right kind of marketing to sell a product.
Yeah.
Right? But the point being, know what you want. Visualize your dream. At least come up with a dream.
Yeah.
At least think of where would you like to be in 5 years, right? That's the very popular interview question. Where do you want to see? Where do you see yourself?
Yeah.
In 5 years?
I've been thinking about that one a lot because I realized a while back that it's like, I have not once in my life had a 5-year plan. I haven't even had a 1-year plan. Maybe I've had a 1-year plan. No, I really haven't. I've had maybe a few months plan. It's like, I want to get that thing or I want to do that thing. But it's like, it's never more than a couple months. And I really thought about it. I'm like, okay, just actually coming up with what could I feasibly achieve in 5 years? So it's like I've looked back at my life. What have I gotten in the last 5 years? I've actually made quite a bit of progress being aimless, relatively aimless. It's like, okay, film industry job. That's about it. And so I kind of just went with the flow of that, and I've made it here. But beyond that, I didn't have okay, I want to be at this specific company and get this specific job.
I want to have this title. I want to be making this much money.
All I knew is that I wanted to be in post-production and I wanted to live it in the city.
Yeah.
And even with those vague goals, with talking to other people and looking at whatever systems are in place, I've been able to achieve that. But I had those goals, even if they were vague, of post-production and city. Well, I've got both of those.
Now what?
Yeah.
It's like, well, one, failing upwards is a thing.
Yeah.
So even if you aren't aimless and you just keep plugging away at whatever you're doing, you're going to get good at that thing.
Yeah.
And then you can find your way upwards even if you didn't have a plan. You can start with the dream, but then actually kind of put together what you actually want to do. Because some people go, I want to be rich.
Yeah.
Rich doing what?
Yeah.
Why do you want to be rich?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why do you want to be rich? Also, when money's the goal, you're never going to have enough. Because what is rich to you? Is it... Because rich to other people is us.
I love that story about the fisherman. About this business guy goes up to a fisherman.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, oh, you're fishing right now? Well, you know, if you charged a little bit more for the fish that you're selling, you could store some of that money and then buy a bigger boat and a nicer rod. And then you can hire other people to help you fish and more rods, bigger boats. Next thing you know, you got a huge boat. You're casting wide nets and you're catching a lot of fish and you're selling and making a giant profit. Now you got a big fishery company. Now you can expand and do other things. You can get multiple boats, multiple locations, multiple teams. And then you're making a lot more money. And then what are you going to do with all that money? You're going to retire and then fish. So it's like, well, you could just skip a few steps if you know what you want.
Yeah.
you can figure out how you actually get there. You can set the goal, but only if you really know where you want to be. You can't just say, I want to be rich.
Yeah.
So rich doing what?
Yeah, because that's the thing. And like, there's this book, I want to say it's The Wealthy Barber. It's something like that. And this guy's main advice, one of the things he talks about is that he made himself coffee every morning because he found, I don't want to spend money at Starbucks or anything. So he would just make himself coffee. Whereas he'd say it's like, okay, if I make myself coffee, but you spend money at Starbucks or something, you're spending $5 or $6 that I'm not spending. So you could save that up. But then he finished that point with, but if what you want is the Starbucks experience, go to Starbucks and get that experience.
Right.
It's like, have that aim. Know where you want to go and where you're going to be spending or putting in your effort.
We're going to dig back into this with some healthy habits a little bit later. But, there's even, if you know what you want, right, you can decide, I want the coffee or I want the Starbucks experience.
Yeah.
But if you don't know what you want and you're just going to Starbucks because you think it's the easiest thing or because for whatever you're just stuck in that habit, you can find yourself down a bad place that could actually take you further away from the things you do know you want.
Which it does.
If you want to be rich, do you want to be rich while continuing to spend this money at Starbucks? Because this is a different...
It's like, then cut out something else.
Yeah.
Because there's bound to be, there's bound to be something you can cut out.
That's my other piece of advice. Figure it out. Number 1, take one small step. So we talked about knowing what you want can involve setting goals, and the goals themselves, like, you just break down those things into smaller and smaller things.
Yeah, that's essentially what this whole thing is. Like, get your aim and now break that whole process down into steps.
If my goal is to get to the top of a mountain. Okay, now that I know where it is, I can actually chart it. I could say, okay, the mountain is 5 kilometers to the top. Okay. I can break each of these kilometers down. 1 kilometer. Okay. I can't make it all the way up to the top, but today I can go 500 meters up and then 500 meters back down.
Yeah.
That's 1 kilometer. Okay, now I'm going to keep practicing that until I have the cardio and the physical fitness to go up 1 kilometer. And then next thing I know, I'm 2 kilometers.
Yeah.
Right? So when you figure out where your goal is, you can chart the way there, and now you can break that way up, that path, into smaller steps until you figure out, okay, what is the one small step I need to take today to push things forward?
Yeah.
Right?
Because even like you were saying with the whole limousine image, it's, well, now you want to climb this mountain, so the first thing you need is climbing gear. Well, how do you get that? You need a job to make money so you can get it. And it's like breaking down all those steps. Or even further down to make your bed in the morning.
To do with the limousine image, Google how much a limousine costs.
Boom.
How much does a limousine rental cost?
Yeah.
Okay, now that I know how much that costs and I look at how much I have in the bank, right? How often can I afford to rent a limousine with my friends? Let's see how much a Gucci sport coat costs. Like, just start looking this stuff up. Make yourself excited about acquiring these things. This is obviously very materialist, but
it's a baseline, because once you actually give something a name, it becomes real.
Yeah, a name and a number.
Yeah,
numbers are very important.
Yeah, because it's like, okay, well, how many times do you want to rent a limo?
Take one small step. One.
Yeah.
Yeah. You don't have to take all 1,000.
It's like,
but start
brushing your teeth.
Yes.
Start doing that properly.
You don't have to become. If you're trying to get fit, if you're trying to lose weight, you're not going to lose 40 pounds in a day.
Yeah.
But you can challenge yourself to be like, okay, I'll make enough healthy decisions to lose 1 pound.
That's the thing you always hear about weight loss is it's a lifestyle change.
Yeah.
And that's where take one small step matters. Like, okay, what is the healthy lifestyle? Look at that and go, what aspect of that am I actually willing to do a small part of? Then do that small part thing. It's like, start integrating that into your life. So when 5 years comes, you now have a healthy lifestyle because you've integrated this one little thing. And then after that, the next thing, the next thing, the next thing, the next thing.
Now, maybe number 2 should actually come before taking one small step, because number 2 is change your mental maps.
Yeah.
This means a number of different things, right? This is, again, charting the course. But if you're stuck and you find yourself on the brink of poverty, and you are not examining the way that you are spending your, like, for instance, your spending habits, right? Or maybe you find yourself depressed and you're constantly gaining weight and you feel like you're stuck in it. Sometimes what you need to do is figure out a way to step outside of your way of thinking so you can gain some perspective. Gain some perspective and look at the way things are, right? Don't just look, if we're talking about the limousine idea, don't just look at, these Instagram influencers or whatever, or celebrities who are in the limousines and go, oh, I wish I had one. That's being stuck. Change your mental map. Google how much that costs.
Yeah.
Right? Gain some information.
Yeah. What is this person actually doing?
Learn. Right? There's this book called The Tao of Wu that is written by the RZA, who is one of the founder members of the Wu-Tang Clan. And he talks about some of the 12 jewels, right? Or the 12 rules. 12 jewels. I think they're called the 12 jewels of Islam or something. The first one is knowledge. The second is wisdom. The third is understanding. He does them in threes. The first one is knowledge because you have to learn. You have to gain the information, take it in, listen and observe as much as possible. Don't just stop where you're thinking. If you see something you like, figure out where it came from, figure out how to get it, take in the information.
Yeah.
The second step is wisdom, right? Now that you have gained the perspective, consider it. The third is understanding, because once you have applied wisdom to knowledge, you now understand the situation, right? Now that I see $1 million, I want $1 million. I do my research, I take in the knowledge of what do people have to do to make $1 million? What kind of businesses can I run? Now let me apply wisdom. Let me consider what I can actually do to meet what I've learned, to put my path on that. And now that I understand what that path looks like, I'm actually more capable of getting $1 million, right? Or climbing a mountain, or losing weight, or any of these things, right? So you change your mental map to mean a number of different things. But in that sense, we can see that it means learning, observing, it means considering things, it means stepping outside of the way that you were thinking about it before and trying to gain perspective on the situation. If it's a social situation and somebody's mad at you, gaining perspective doesn't mean reacting to what they're talking about. Gaining perspective on the situation can mean consider their point of view, right? Why are they mad at you? Is it because of something you actually did or just the way they're feeling at the moment? Did you do something that was particularly offensive to them and not think about it? What can you do in the future to prevent that? Do you actually need to spend your time around this person, for instance, right? Change your mental map, gain perspective on the situation, learn and observe, and then start taking small steps, work towards the goal, the thing you want. Do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, actually, because as much as I've done a whole lot of, self-help research, I don't know, listening to Jocko Willink.
Reading, looking at Instagram.
Yeah. It's like I had Jocko, Jordan Peterson, Alan Watts, and all that stuff. I think I agree that rule number 2 should be rule number 1, because as much as I know a whole lot about this stuff and I understand it, I have not implemented borderline any of it in years, because I haven't changed essentially that mental map of, okay, I actually have to do this, not just know about it. It's like knowing about it doesn't do anything.
Yeah.
You have to act.
Yes.
Yeah.
I can be the wisest person in the world, but if I still react emotionally to everything everybody tells me, I'm going to seem like an idiot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, sure, I know a whole lot of things about how to make my life better, but I don't do any of them.
Number 3, struggle is good. Scary is good. If we go back to that idea of climbing the mountain, you can take the first 100 steps, you can climb up one of these steep hills on your way, and it'll be a struggle, especially if it's not something you normally do. Recently, I was hiking up Seymour, and there was a lot of areas where I was like pushing myself, because I was doing it in the snow, to like scramble up these icy hills and barely make it to the top and like be panting and literally almost on all fours, hands and knees. I'm like trying to catch my breath and push myself up to like keep going. The struggle of it actually kind of made it fun. But the thing that you know about the struggle is that you are actually when you're meeting resistance, it's because you are one of two things. You're either going the wrong way or you're going the right way, right?
Yeah.
And that seems very confusing, but
There's a difference.
there's a difference between
Yeah.
hitting a brick wall and pushing through a bush,
Yeah.
right? There's a difference between falling off a cliff and climbing up a hill,
Yeah.
right? Two different types of resistance. One of them tells you you're going the wrong way. I'm meeting a specific type of resistance, right? When you're lifting something heavy, you can feel yourself pull a muscle and you can feel yourself work a muscle.
Yeah. There's a
Right?
huge difference between muscle soreness from, dang, that was a good workout, and shoot, my bicep is busted.
I need to go to the hospital.
Yeah.
In that kind of sense, right? I mean, I've been working out pretty hard. I can tell the difference now between I'm feeling sore because I did a hard workout or something is wrong, I need to stretch more.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right? The other part to it, scary is good. I speak on stage quite frequently. I remember the first times I did it, I was like, oh no, what have I gotten myself into? I'm about to walk out in front of all these people and say this thing,
Yeah.
but it's rewarding to kind of do something that scares you a little bit. At the very least, you could figure out this is not for me,
Yeah.
right?
What I remember in high school, I watched a parkour documentary, and this guy, the whole thing is like he's jumping over all this crap, and he says there's always fear, and the thing is that with fear, what it is, it's essentially your body and mind telling you there is danger here, but it's not saying don't do this, you're gonna die. It's like, yeah, sure, sometimes that's out there, but that's different from fear. That's, shoot, I'm actually gonna die, that is terrifying, but this one is, there is a level of danger going on, and I should be aware of that, because now I can take it into account, and then I can move forward with that. It's like with that in mind.
If you're speaking on stage in front of people and you're nervous,
Yeah.
yeah, of course you're nervous. You're
Yeah.
going to be in front of a bunch of pairs of eyes, and they will, to some degree, judge what you do. So if you do something that's completely erratic or wild or dumb,
Yeah.
you will be judged. There's a reason for you to be nervous, but there's a reason why you're going on stage to begin with, right? You're going in front of these people to give a presentation, to give a talk, to tell
Yeah.
a joke, something. You're demonstrating something of yourself. Of course you're going to be nervous.
Yeah. The other half of that that's interesting is that as much as people are going to judge what you do and say up there, they also expect you to be up there. So if you just back out and say, no, I'm not doing it, they judge you even more for that. It's like there's worse consequences for not facing that fear.
Let's remove even the crowd situation.
Yeah.
Hiking up the mountain,
Yeah.
right? I was on my way up and I look up at one point, the wind had picked up and started carrying the snow. And I looked up and it was like a wall of white and heavy winds were blowing towards me. Scary. Not scary to the point that, oh, I should turn back, but scary to the point where like, okay, this last stretch is going to be difficult.
Yeah.
Appropriately, better snuggle up a little bit, better get those pocket warmers ready and all that stuff and keep going.
Yeah.
Right? But it was also rewarding. Now, if I had decided to turn back at that point, I would have just wasted a lot of time because I didn't make it all the way to the top. Yeah, maybe there was some benefit to like, oh, I at least made it halfway up the mountain. Now I
Yeah.
can go home, but the peak's right there. I can
Yeah.
make it, right? So persevere, struggle.
Yeah.
It's good to struggle a little bit, not just because, like, if your life is comfortable, that's so dangerous. It's so dangerous because comfort, no matter who you are, will corrupt you,
Yep.
right? You'll get into it. I need to have a piece of chocolate after dinner,
Yeah.
right? Even though it's sugary and bad for me. You can get stuck in bad habits. And we'll talk a little bit more about health afterwards, but it's not just eating. It's I need to sit down and watch Netflix, right? Struggle a little bit, do something hard. Not just physically hard, maybe even mentally hard. Solve a Rubik's Cube or something like challenge yourself.
Yeah. One thing that's interesting, the whole idea of it's like, oh, I need this comfort. One thing I say to myself whenever I catch myself in that of I really want this or I need this, there's this one verse in the Bible that I really like. It's talking about fasting. And I believe it's Paul that says, I am no worse off if I do not eat, and I am no better off if I do eat.
ultimately,
Yeah.
in the grand scheme of things, the cheeseburger did not alter your life
Yeah.
that dramatically.
Yeah.
And in fact, you might have spent money and gained calories from it, and it wasn't even that good.
Yeah. And
We're going to get to that.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll get to the health talk in a minute, but I want to keep going with this list.
Yeah.
Number 4, instant judgment is bad.
Hmm.
We talked about this before, and you were telling me something that you learned even in the first episode. You were talking to me about how one of the biggest Stoic philosophies is learning not to be so reactive to things.
That's the idea. There's a difference between reacting and responding.
Yes.
Because reaction is when it's like you do something out of like instinct or reflex. You're not even thinking, you just do it. It just happens. You just say it, you just act that way, you just do that thing. Or even my friend, he makes some music sometimes, and he's got this one line that I really like. He said, making choices out of habit. Mm-hmm. Not even to a flash situation. You react to being in a day. You go through your regular routine without even thinking about it. You're reacting to the day. It's like, okay, I react to waking up. My reaction to waking up is I'm going to stay under these covers warm for the next hour and a half. I'm not thinking about it. I'm just doing it. And it feels like there's some sort of rule. Okay, now it's 8:30. I need to get up. This is when I get up. It's like, no. That's just reacting. Literally, I can just get up whenever I want. Even whenever I don't want. Because I don't want to get up that morning. Well, I can anyways. The actual response would be thinking, okay, it's the morning, I have work and I need to prepare. If I have more time to do that, that's better. That's better for me. And I like it better when I have more time. So even though I don't like the idea of getting up and now I'm cold and I have to do things even though I'm tired, the response would be to think, okay,
if I go to sleep at a reasonable time, I can wake up at a reasonable time.
Yeah.
I will have more time in my day to do useful things, and I will ultimately feel better about myself for having done those useful things.
Exactly.
And it all starts with going to bed at a reasonable time.
Yeah.
That is a response. Let's go back to the example of somebody says something negative to you.
Yeah.
Your reflex, a negative way of thinking, might cause you to react by also saying something negative.
Yeah.
That's not always wrong, but sometimes it's just something we get caught up in.
Yeah.
Even though it's not necessarily useful for us to engage
Yeah.
in this conflict right now.
One thing I was actually thinking earlier while I was grabbing those coffees for us, there was this girl in line who she held the door open for me. I was like, oh, thank you. And then she goes in line and I go in line right behind her. And I went through a scenario in my head of what if I started talking to her with the intention of getting her number, something like that. And my immediate response is that as soon as I my immediate thought is that as soon as I start talking to her, she's going to stop me dead in my tracks, say, I've got a boyfriend or something, or like, I'm not interested. I just held the door open for you, man. Chill out. And my response to her in my head in this imaginary conversation was, whoa, I'm just talking. Calm down. And I realized, like, why is my response to lie and try and convince her my intention wasn't what it was? What if I had just laughed and said, haha, okay, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
You got me.
Yeah. Just considering,
Yeah.
you know what, the thing I love, I've heard this piece of advice is that you can always take a second. Mm-hmm. Somebody asks you a question, you can take a second to think about it, to stop yourself from reacting negatively and rather considering the situation. You know,
And they actually like it more.
people love to take clips of Thomas Shelby from Peaky Blinders because he's kind of a charismatic character. And one of the things he's always doing is silently pausing and looking around the room before answering a question because he's taking the time to think about it, but it's also lending more value to what he will eventually say. Right?
It's a dramatic pause.
Instead of getting emotionally invested and wrapped up in, you know, if I'm in a stressful situation and the heart rate's up there and, you know, I'm thinking about these stressful things all day and I'm in a negative headspace and then somebody asks me a question that says we have a little piece of more work to do and I scowl and I'm like, oh, God damn it. I gotta go through this again. That's, if you just stop and went, oh, okay, it actually turns out that thing that they're asking me to do is a lot easier than it sounds.
Yeah.
And I might not even have to do it if I just point something out.
Yeah.
Right? That happened the other day. It was, someone was like, hey, can you put all these in bullet format or something? Piece of copy that I'd written at work. And they'd be like, hey, can you turn this into a list? I was going to get like, hey, I really don't have time to help you right now. I'm doing 6 other things. I really need to focus on this. I don't have time to run to this other room and look at this thing. But I was like, just see what it is.
Yeah.
So I got up, I was like, okay. And I went over to that room and I looked at it and went, it's already in the list. It's already in the list. That was one of the funny things that happens every once in a while. It's like, people don't actually read what you give them, even though they asked you to do it.
Yeah.
It's so many times they've like, it's so funny. Like so many times a boss will ask me, hey, can you just put it in this format? And I'll be like, okay. So that's like actually not change anything that was written.
Yeah.
Just make it look a little bit different.
Yeah.
Even just so that they can see the way they want to see it, which is fine.
Yeah.
Fine. Right. Even if they did want me to change the right, that's kind of my job, but whatever. The point being, if I took the time to think, I took a breath, I took a second and just went, let's see what it is. Let's apply that idea of changing the mental map and give myself the space to observe what the situation
instead of
requires.
just assuming you knew what everything was and it was the way you didn't want it and react and exploding.
Now, there was something you said at the beginning, which is sometimes a reaction can be instinctive. And I don't think instinct is wrong because we look at the way like nature disposes us to have these instincts for a reason.
Yeah.
If my instinct is to jump backwards when I see something coming at me, that's a healthy thing to do.
Yeah, it's a different sort of instinct I'm thinking of, like exactly what you just talked about. Your instinct was, I don't have time, go away. But instead, you responded and go, let's see what it is.
Yes.
Because your instinct is to assume I already know what it is, and it's not the thing I have time for, so I'm not going to do it. But it turns out you didn't know what it was, and you did have time for it, so you did it.
You've mentioned a couple times Jocko, and we've, I think, mentioned him on the podcast altogether a number of times, but he's a military guy, Navy SEAL, and one of the things he always likes to talk about is tactics versus strategy.
Yes.
Sometimes your reaction can be tactical. It can be useful for you to react to something and be ready to react to something in a situation, right?
Yeah.
That's an interesting point too, is being ready to react.
Yeah.
Because your reaction then, if you're ready for it, that is technically a response.
Yeah.
A response is something strategic. You plan this out beforehand. It wasn't, hey, I saw this coming at me, so I jumped. It was, if they come at me from this direction, I will jump.
Yeah.
Right? So observe what you're doing and see if it measures up to your long-term strategy or your short-term tactics. Or are you doing this without thinking at all?
Yeah.
And if that is the situation, are you predisposed to do something negative in that situation? It takes a little bit of self-examination.
Yeah.
Right? Am I just yelling because somebody's stressing me out right now? Or am I yelling because they can't hear me?
Yeah.
You know? Right? Or because, hey, I need to be able to get some control over this room. I need to raise my voice a
Because
little
even if somebody does raise their voice at you, they might not be aware how angry they sound. So you can go, hey, could you like say that in a little nicer of a tone? And they go, oh, sorry, I didn't even know. Because people don't even realize what they're doing.
Yeah. And, you know, like if somebody does yell at you, if your first reaction is to scowl or look like, hey, you're attacking me, that might predispose them to be like, okay, we're in the conflict now. Let me yell more, right? Yeah.
One stoic bit I like in regards to being attacked by somebody is you are not harmed until you believe you are harmed. So if somebody yells at you and you immediately believe they have attacked me, they are mad at me, this is bad for me, they have inflicted something on me, then they have. But if you go, this person's just yelling, their voice is at a higher volume, they are looking at me, then you're not harmed.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's almost like a very Zen way of looking at the world, like we were talking about, which if you're walking from your car to your office and it starts raining on you very heavily, you could be like, dang it, I'm wet now, all my clothes are drenched, this is ruining my day.
Yeah.
Or you can just be like, it's raining. And when I walk into the office, people will see me and know that it has rained. So what?
I remember a comedian, I saw a clip of a comedian talking about that. He's like, people love being wet, except when it comes from the sky. You're like, you go to the beach, you go to the pool, you go to the shower, whatever, but as soon as it rains,
So what?
Yeah.
We live in Canada. It rains all the time. All right, let's look at the next one.